we survived the struggles. There's a lot of bad experiences that you might go through, but just know that it's temporary and that you're going to learn and become so much stronger because of those struggles.
Wow, guys, can you believe it? We're already over 20 episodes into Nick Speaks, but here's the truth. I couldn't have done it alone. The amazing team at Goodnight Podcasting Solutions has been with me every step of the way, from those early strategy sessions all the way to editing, promotion, and even helping me land guests. They've made it so all I have to do is show up, record, and focus on delivering the message. Kyle at Goodnight Podcasting Solutions tailors everything to your unique needs and is so creative to give you what you're looking for. But one thing's for sure, he gives 110% to help you create an incredible podcast. So if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast, now's the time. Hit the link in the show notes, set up a strategy session with Kyle, and get ready to take your podcast to the next level. Trust me, you won't regret it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this brand new installment of the Nick Speaks podcast, where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud. And this is the podcast dedicated to the disabled community. I'm your host, Nicholas Comstock. You guys, I am so excited about today's episode. I'm excited about every episode, but especially when I have a guest. And today I have a comedian who is also disabled, and he is just hilarious. And he has a really interesting outlook on life. You know, during our pre-call, he said he had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and that just really inspired me and has a totally different outlook, which is why I love doing this show, because it shows me that, number one, I'm not the only one dealing with this disability out here. And number two, there are so many people with disabilities that have different perspectives. So please help me welcome Phillip Bramwell. Phillip, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Nick. I appreciate it.
Oh, I am so glad to have you. So why don't you start off the episode with just telling everybody a little bit about yourself and where you're from, if that's okay, your age, all that type of good stuff, and then we'll get into
Absolutely. My name is Phillip Bramwell, age 26. I was born with spastic quadriplegic cerebral palsy, so that means I had a brain bleed due to premature birth, and I'm impaired in 4 limbs, so that's where quadriplegia comes from. And I've had it all my life. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I currently live in Tempe, Arizona.
That's awesome. Arizona, where it's nice and warm and you don't have to deal with any snow. It's so wonderful. I am looking to get out of Ohio as soon as I possibly can, because I do not like the snow and the cold. I don't know what the cold does to your body, but the cold literally messes with my body. So I'm looking forward to getting out of it. Hopefully within the next year or 2, maybe 3. We'll see what God has planned for me. But yeah, I am definitely wanting to go somewhere warm. So Phil, why don't you tell the Nick Speaks audience how what does your disease, what does it do to your body? Like, you're very spastic, as am I. And what are some of the things that you've had to go through in life because of this condition that you have, this spastic quadriplegia?
Okay, so I was born premature at 28 weeks with quadriplegic cerebral palsy. My muscles are very tight, and so my limbs are highly restricted, especially my lower body, my legs, and so it causes extreme stiffness. And because it's a brain injury, That's where my speech impediment comes from. And of course, everything can be worked on and optimized, but at the baseline, we have our condition for our whole lifespan.
Yeah. You said you were 28 weeks early. How many months is that?
Well, I was 28, born at 28 weeks, so I was about 12 weeks early.
Oh, you were born 12 weeks early. Okay. So you were a preemie and you were a preemie, right?
Yes, I'm a triplet, but the other two, my brother and my sister, they don't have CP or anything else.
Okay. And so that's kind of an interesting connection between you and I because you're a triplet and I'm an identical twin. So, and it's the same thing with my brother, although I say my brother has severe mental issues just as a joke. Because he is a little weird. I'm better than he is, better looking, older, all that type of stuff. So, um, anyway. So yeah, that's a little interesting connection between us is that you're a triplet and I'm an identical twin. So are you close with the other two? Are you like really close? Do you guys like, did you like the same things? Are your personalities different? I'm sure they are, but
So just like any other siblings, we've had our ups and downs, especially me and my brother. I mean, we're all the same age, so we experienced our life, at the same pace, if you will. But due to me having a disability and my siblings not having a disability, I suppose my upbringing was a little bit different in the sense that I had more doctor's appointments, therapies, and things of that nature. My parents tried to treat me as equal opportunity as possible.
yeah, that's really great. And you told me that on pre-call, and I thought that was awesome. So I grew up having physical therapy too, and how did physical therapy go for you growing up? Because I know it was really difficult for me, and one of the regrets I have is not really following through with the physical therapy and not really pushing myself as hard as I should have. I don't think my parents really did that either. Pushing me as far as I can. But what can you say to those who may be in physical therapy because of their disability, and how can you encourage them and stress the importance of making sure they do their physical therapy because it can help them in the end?
I'll answer your question for physical therapy, but really this applies to any type of therapy.
Right.
I think it's important for any child and teenager to take all therapy as seriously as possible, because now I'm 26 and there isn't a lot of help for people with disabilities as adults. I mean, there's no really help if you're able-bodied either, but there's no help really if you're disabled. And if there is help, you become severely restricted. So it's best to optimize yourself through physical therapy or whatever therapy you're doing. Is probably a combination of multiple things. And also applying yourself in school, that's a big factor as well. And just the goal is just to be as functional and independent as you can be to your particular level. Of course, we all have different severity and things of that nature, so we're not all going to be the same, but the general principles apply no matter how mild or severe you are.
Yeah, and yeah, and what would you say to those, because you are living on your own, and what would you say to those people with disabilities who maybe they want to live on their own, but they don't have the support system that you did to live on their own? What would you say to those parents who have kids with disabilities who want to live on their own? And what would you say to encourage people with disabilities who have the same goal that you did and you're here doing it?
Well, first, I want to acknowledge the parents that are concerned about their children potentially living alone when they're adults. It's a natural thing to be worried about because, if I'm being honest, there isn't a lot of help, a lot of resource. There is not a lot of help or resources for people with disabilities as adults, whether you live with someone or not. So it's a fair acknowledgement that you're concerned. But what I will say is that if you start young enough, like I would say 7 or 8 at the latest, instilling different ideologies and exposing your disabled children to a little bit of struggle and figuring things out, you can eventually build to the point where you could live on your own. And I have 40 hours of attendant care, but they don't live with me. They come in and out to do their shift, and then I'm able to manage the other times, but I have 40 hours for 7 days a week, and I'm able to manage the rest of the time. So it's not easy at all, but I have more opportunities. So I'd rather be on my own than be restricted living with somebody else, whether that be a group home or my parents. And it's not that my parents restricts me. It's just that where they live, it's residential. And so there's less access to public transportation.
Yeah. And that's a big issue too with disability services. Like when I lived out with my grandparents and my parents before I moved out on my own 7 years ago, it was very limited. It was very hard to get caregivers because we were in a rural area. Transportation was very hard to come by because, again, we were in a rural area. So it is very difficult when you live in those type of areas to get services, and it would be helpful if somehow, some way that our local congresses, our local governments would figure out how to get services, better services in rural areas, because in some cases, a lot of big cities are not safe to live in. But I'm fortunate to live in it, and what I would deem to be a pretty big city that is pretty safe. Do you live in a big city, or is Tempe kind of rural, or is it a decent size? Or
Tempe is it's a city. It's actually a college town, so it's a transient town mostly where out of state students come in, they go to school, then they leave, and then it gets replaced with new students. So it's a lot of students because it's a college town, but there's also people like me that are residents that aren't associated with the university.
Yeah, that works out well. Phil, last week's Nick Speaks episode was all about the current administration shutting down DEI, and I share my personal DEI experience in that episode. And if you guys haven't listened to it, it's the one right before this one. And a lot of people with disabilities are freaking out because the current administration shut down or is in the process of shutting down DEI. And I have a very different feeling about that. And I would like to know, from your perspective as another person with a disability, how do you feel about the current administration shutting down DEI programs, and how do you feel about the program in general?
I do not support DEI. And also, I want to be clear. So DEI the mandate is over, but companies can still choose to keep DEI if they want to. But I don't support DEI because I think it's wage gap exploitation and nothing more. It's just to cover up for not paying people with disabilities what we're supposed to get paid for equivalent work to non-disabled people. So that's my opinion on it. I don't think it's helpful for us as a disabled population. And also from the employer's perspective, they're not doing it when it was mandated. They weren't doing it because they wanted to. They were doing it because it was a mandate. So now that it's gone, that clearly proves that it was not a genuine experience and that we're better off just relying on our qualifications like everybody else.
Yeah. And somebody said in my comments this week, Phil, that DEI has nothing to do with people with disabilities. And in my opinion, it has everything to do with DEI because you're focusing on diversity and inclusion. And if you're focusing on diversity and inclusion, then there's the D and there's the I. And if you want everybody involved, well, people with disabilities, in my opinion, are in that category. What say you?
Well, beforehand, disability was what we call a protected class. So I guess that's why we were classified as DEI. But I do recognize what that person was saying. It is a little bit weird that a disability is in the same classification as, say, race or gender or sexual orientation, because that stuff stays the same. Whereas disability, you can get a disability at any age. So from that perspective, maybe it is a little weird that we're grouped in that way because it's not really the same thing, but we were grouped in that way. But it didn't really help us, so it's irrelevant regardless.
Yeah. Yeah. So what about, let's talk about your work experience. Did you find issue trying to get a job? Because I know for me, I've been told I'm unemployable because of my disabilities. And I've been told there's nothing that I can offer an employer. Have you found it difficult to get a job simply because you're disabled?
Yes, it is difficult to get a job with a disability. Separate of what people think, we just have fewer options compared to our able-bodied counterparts. But despite that, I do have what I feel is reasonable work experience. And if you want to ask about that, we can go over that.
Yeah. So what type of work experience have you had?
So when I was a child, I was a child actor and model. And so, I took professional acting classes when I was a kid and worked, and I'm in the union SAG-AFTRA. So that's the Professional Actors Union, Screen Actors Guild.
Oh, okay, cool. What were you in? Were you in any type of movies or TV shows?
I just want to answer this second part of it before uh, so I, I, if you're a disabled performer, you don't get a lot of roles or auditions because there just isn't a lot of work for a disabled child actor. So I went to school. I went to University of Arizona, graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism, and then I worked in customer service for nearly 5 years before I was laid off. So that's a summary of my work history.
Okay. Why do you think that there's not a lot of, Hollywood's in California and they're all about being inclusive, and so is New York. They're all about being inclusive and everything else. So why do you think that a lot of roles are not available for people like you and I?
Well, to be honest, the entertainment business is the most inclusive industry in the world. I'll stick to America because that's what I know, but I would venture to say the most inclusive in the world. You have a better chance in entertainment being successful with as a disabled person compared to a corporate America employee, because everyone that I know that isn't broke, everyone that I know of that isn't broke is a comedian, actor, athlete, but I can't name one person that isn't broke from corporate America. And that's because corporate America, even though they claim that they support DEI, they did not do it in the right way. Whereas the entertainment business does it in a better way.
Right. I understand that, but you said there weren't a lot of roles for you. There's not a lot of roles for people who are disabled. Why do you think that is?
Well, it's just not on the top of people's minds because most of the writers and people in on the production side, they're not familiar with disability, and so it's not prioritized. But it's not prioritized in any other field either. So that's just society in itself.
So how can other industries, the entertainment industry, customer service industry, how can other industries make people with disabilities a priority? What do you think they need to do in order to make people with disabilities a priority?
Well, to begin, we need to be examined and hired or not hired based on our merit and nothing else. I think that's where the problem began because when we had DEI that was mandated, we did get more opportunities as a community, but everything was mostly volunteer. So even though we were getting more opportunities on paper and maybe the Department of Labor statistics were looking better than they had in the past, our personal finances as a whole in our community didn't really help. Did people get off Social Security? No. Did people get off food stamps? No. Did people get off WIC or any other social program? No. So it didn't really help our financial situation when we had DEI, and that is because the DEI jobs were volunteer.
Yeah, and that's something I've struggled with. If people with disabilities, if I'm good enough to volunteer, why am I not good enough to get a paid position?
Right. That's where the conflict comes. It's like we are a lot of organizations, and I do have examples that I've experienced. We were good enough to volunteer, but all of a sudden, when there's money involved, we become less desirable or not picked. So that's corporate America for you right now.
Yeah, and from my perspective, and I've said this many times on my show, and I don't know how you feel, Phil. The government has me on a tight shoestring, and I'm looking to get off of it as soon as I possibly can. So if people out there who are willing to give us a volunteer chance, but you're not willing to give us a paid chance because you're afraid we'll lose our benefits, maybe you should talk to the person that you're looking into hiring and seeing how they feel. Because a lot of us would love more of a chance than just to get a $900 Social Security check every month, and in my case, $63 of food stamps every month. It's not really, I'm barely making it. So if I have a chance to make it just a little bit better by getting a $200 to $300 paycheck every month, or maybe a little bit more than that, I'm going to take that instead of just the little shoestring. I said last week, why stay on the shoestring when you have the opportunity to own the shoe factory? So, yeah.
So I encourage all people with disabilities men, women. Even I worked as a child, but that was entertainment is a rare exception that children work. But anyway, men and women, I encourage all men and women with disabilities to attempt participation in the workforce. I hear that argument a lot that people are choosing not to work or keeping their hours down to retain their food stamps or retain their SSI or things like that. But the way I see it is you're not really a free person until you get off SSI or food stamps. I mean, you're constantly under the government's watchful eye, and it's a mental nightmare. So I would say that you're better off investing your time and effort, getting your career skills up, and that way you won't need SSI and food stamps and things like that. Not to say you won't have financial struggles, because you will, but at least you'll have more freedom, and I think freedom is very valuable.
Yeah, and the respect of your finances, because you're right, the Social Security doesn't give you much freedom, hardly any freedom at all with your finances, with that $2,000 saving cap that they put us under, and we can't have anything over $2,000 at all. And so it can be very hard. I want to move to you being involved in the entertainment industry. What made you want to get involved in comedy? And folks, we're going to put a link to Phil's YouTube channel, and he's got some of his comedy on there, and it's hilarious. So what made you get into that?
So I got involved in comedy because it's similar to acting. So I feel I had the fundamental skills, and I decided that I should give it a go because people tell me I'm funny, and I lost my job in November, and so my time opened up, and I reinvested in comedy, and so I've been going all in on that, and I'm gonna continue to do that. So I do have some clips on YouTube, but I encourage people to come see me in person if you're in Arizona, or if I'm traveling and you're in the area. It'd be great if I saw you in person, because that's another issue. It's like all this free content. Free content is necessary, but a comedian also needs to make money, just like everything else. That's where disabled people can also have a struggle. It's like there's a lot of free content out here, and so people are not really paying us for our content. But anyway, we'll work on these issues. But overall, I see a lot of financial issues in the disabled community, but we have to start working on that.
Yeah, we do. We do. If you're comfortable, would you do one of your bits?
So to be honest, I'm gonna decline that, and that's just because I would like people to engage with my YouTube channel and also see me in person.
Absolutely.
But yes, you can check me out. I'm sure Nick will link my YouTube channel, and I would love for you to check it out. And if you'd like to see me in person, I'm based in Arizona, so most of my shows are there for now. But if I get opportunities or sponsorship to go, travel around, that's what I would like to do.
Yeah, it would be awesome, and I would encourage you. I'm going to try to make it out there and see. I would love to see it. It really is funny, and we will put Phil's YouTube channel in the description and where you can find him and all that stuff, because it really made me go in stitches. Really hilarious. So yes, I'm gonna tease mercilessly so that you will be forced to go check it out, because it's hilarious. I want to, this is an interesting topic that we keep going back to. You say there's a lot of changes that need to be made financially in respects to people with Social Security. What do you think of things like the ABLE account that a lot of people with disabilities have? Do you support that?
I do support the concept of that, but even that's restrictive. You can't use it for this type of expense. You can only use it for that type of expense. What I see is I want people with disabilities to have total financial freedom like everyone else would. And so I guess that's a step in the right direction, but like we have to push a lot further. You know, that they're giving us little things here and there because, you know, people are advocating hard, but we have to keep going because we can do better and we should do better. We deserve better and we know better. And so let's try to make things better.
Yeah. So what would be the ideal, because right now the savings cap for people with disabilities is at $2,000. Last year, there was a bill introduced, and I don't know what happened. I guess it died in Congress. But last year, there was a bill introduced that was going to raise the savings cap from $2,000 to $10,000 and also eliminate the marriage penalty when people with disabilities get married. But what would be the ideal savings cap for people while they're still on Social Security, you think?
If you do need Social Security, I would say probably $10,000 minimum, because if you have $2,000 in your bank, first of all, you don't have $2,000 because you have expenses, so it's always less than $2,000. And then it makes it near impossible, pretty much impossible to qualify for a mortgage or a car or anything like that. So we struggle not only with actual money, but we have no assets either. We're just completely broke, and that makes it less attractive to partners, especially I would say disabled men trying to get women. It's near impossible when you're broke because everything is resource-based in one way or another.
Yeah, a lot of women are interested in how deep a man's pocket is, unfortunately.
And I do want to comment on that. I think it's fine for a woman to ask disabled men, if they have a job, and that because I mean, the way I grew up, like I grew up in a stable household, and that wouldn't have happened if there was no money. So it's fair game for a woman to ask about those kind of questions, and it's up to us as disabled men to hold ourselves to a standard and try to work, try to make something happen. I mean, I have, and I'm going to continue to do that. That's just the way I feel about it.
Yeah. That's interesting that you brought up having romantic or having a partner. Well, what do you struggle with the idea of? Do you look to get married one day? Do you struggle with maybe I won't get married because I'm disabled, or do you have a desire to get married? How do you those romantic desires?
I've had one relationship in the past. It didn't work out for various reasons. And I always thought, even when I was a kid, that it was possible to get a relationship with a disability, but I also knew that to get a relationship with a disability, you have to push extra hard, with your employment, with your general stability, because at a baseline, disability has the optics, the appearance that it's not a very stable lifestyle, not stable health-wise, not stable financially, not stable in any way whatsoever. And so not very attractive to the average woman, probably not attractive to the average man either. So it's up to us to try to close whatever gaps that we can to make us more attractive.
As far as, yeah, because, some of the stuff you're saying, Phil, I've never thought of before. I mean, of course, I want to, take care of my partner, whoever that may be. But stabilization is very important for a man or a woman, whether it's a man or a woman, whether it's a man bringing in the money or a woman bringing in the money. But a lot of women want to be cared for. And actually, that's more of from a Christian perspective, that's more of a biblical concept. So a lot of the things that you're saying to me make sense, and they're opening my eyes to some things, which is another reason why I love doing this podcast, because you meet people from all different walks of life, and you get to hear their perspectives. So I'm glad that you're bringing that up. So have you struggled as a person with a disability fitting in, even with disabled people, or have you just been able to fit in anywhere?
I don't believe in fitting in. I think that we're all different in our own ways. I mean, from a disability perspective, it's hard to fit in with able-bodied people, maybe because I struggle with employment, and so maybe I'm not as financially stable as I could or should be. But then on the disabled side, when I say I've done all these different things like acting and college, then I can't really fit in to a lot of disabled conversations because a lot of them haven't done that, and then there's jealousy and things like that. When I say what I've done, I mean, selfishly, I am promoting myself, but also, I'm just trying to make people see that there's options for us other than being broke as a joke for our entire life with no romance and anything else. I want to live, not just survive.
Yeah. Yeah. You said something so interesting to me, and I said it at the opening of the show, and I kind of want you to share that with everybody. You said you had to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Can you expand on that?
Yes. So because I'm severely disabled, but I choose to live on my own, that means that I'm consenting to a big level of struggle. But because I wanted to do this, my parents didn't kick me out. They didn't say, "Oh, you have to live on your own." I could have lived with my mom my whole life. She would have been open to that. But because I chose this life that I live and I'm having a great time, I also am choosing to struggle. But to me, having a struggle with more opportunity is better than having less struggle and no opportunity at all. So I'm happy with my choice.
That's amazing. That is amazing. How do you said you get 40 hours a week of care. So how do you manage, what are some things that you put in place for you when your care is not there? How do you manage when your care is not there?
So it's a struggle when my caregivers aren't here. I'm not able to get off the floor if I fall. And so that's the biggest hazard, if you will. But I have Hey Siri, and my neighbors are close by. I do have neighbors that are willing to help me if I fall, but obviously, just for my own personal safety, it's best that I try not to fall, but it does happen. But I know the risk that I took when I chose to live alone. And, that's why I have to keep my body as strong and functional as possible, just like anyone else, to maintain the lifestyle that I have.
That's incredible. That's incredible. And what was I know you said that your parents really treated you as an equal. So what are some of the things you talked about, maybe teaching your kids at 7 or 8, how to be, what was the biggest thing or some of the biggest things that your parents taught you in order for you to be as independent as you are?
I would say it was less of what they said, like their like verbal advice. It was more of their exposure that they gave me to different things. For example, I mentioned the acting and the modeling professionally, but also on the disabled side, I played wheelchair sports. So I wasn't isolated from the able-bodied community, but I also wasn't isolated from the disabled community. So I drew different lessons from both sides and kind of made it my own to think the way that I do now.
Wow. Yeah. So did you struggle after you graduated from school to connect, or did you just go right on to the next chapter like everybody else does?
So I graduated in from college in 2019, so during COVID basically. And so it took me about 8 months to get a position, the one that I had for 5 years before I got laid off. So I'm not sure if it was related to being disabled or because it was COVID, but it took me about 8 months after college to get a job.
Hey, let's go back a little bit further. What about after high school? Did you struggle after that?
Um,
Go right into college after that?
I went straight from high school to college, so that was a smooth transition, but that was because I knew where I wanted to go, and what I wanted to do, what major I wanted, which was journalism. So it made sense for me to go straight to college because I knew the direction I wanted to go in. And so that investment that my family made in me, I think it was a very good and wise investment.
Did you spend any time at all in your educational time in special ed or? Yeah.
So I was in special education for mathematics. I'm still not very good at math. It's probably I know for sure it's the brain damage. And so I'm not too good at math, but somehow I passed the minimum levels that I needed to. In my state, it was Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So I skated by barely, but I managed to graduate. And then in college, I avoided math because it wasn't required for my major.
Did you party a lot in college? I didn't get the opportunity to go to real college. Were you a party animal?
I went to like 3 parties. It was okay, but I wanted to focus on myself because I knew for sure that even with a college degree, that getting a job was going to be difficult for me. So I just wanted to make sure that I was as good as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So to wrap up here, Phil, what are some parting words or advice that you have for people that are disabled or parents that are having disabled children? What would you tell them?
So for the parents or whoever the caregiver is, I would say that your child is going to struggle no matter what. The struggle that we face in America, let's say, is much bigger than any parent can protect them from. So they're going to struggle. So the objective as a parent is for you to put them in a position where they're exposed to different things so they learn how to deal with, manage, struggling, and develop their own coping and their own strategies to get through life. And then to my fellow disabled people, particularly the younger people, the children. I want to acknowledge the struggle that you're going through. I went through the struggle, and so did countless others. Uh, we survived the struggles. There's a lot of bad experiences that you might go through, but just know that it's temporary, the struggles, and that you're going to learn and become so much stronger because of those struggles.
Yeah. Yeah. And the number one thing is you can't give up on your dreams, no matter what anybody tells you, because I'm sure Phil's experienced a lot of, naysayers, or a lot of, how can you do that? I know.
I do want to comment on that, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So, as a disabled person, especially if you're young, you're going to be in the severe minority in the workforce. If you're in the workforce, you're probably going to be the only, like, let's say, wheelchair person in your company. So you have to get used to the fact that you're going to be the trailblazer, the one that blazes the path for not only for yourself but for people coming up behind you. So yeah, it's going to be hard if you're a young person in the workforce, because there isn't a lot of us in the workforce. So I would just say, whatever you want to do, you can do it, but you have to be willing to accept the struggle that you're going to have.
Yep. And it's not going to come overnight. And my success on TikTok, my success here did not happen overnight. Had to go, and Phil's success in stage and acting and everything else he's done did not happen overnight. It's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, but it's worth it in the end. And you'll be able to make it if you just keep going. And unfortunately, I would call on, our American leaders and our Congress. Unfortunately, people with disabilities are some of the most, we're still the highest group of individuals that are not working. And that needs to change, whether it needs to happen through legislation or just employers being willing enough to really sit down with us and say, what are your weaknesses and what are your strengths, and how can you bring our company to the next level? And so we really need employers and Congress to really come together and say, how can we get the so-called unemployable disabled community employable and make it meaningful and have meaningful wages? We really need to start having these conversations.
I do want to comment on that.
Absolutely.
By saying, besides the government and employers themselves, a big factor in employment success when you're disabled is actually the medical community, your therapists, your doctors. A lot of the time when you go to the doctor and you say you can't work, they just endorse that you can't work because they don't know any better. But the medical community can play a role in giving their disabled patients ideas of what they can do, or goals they can focus on. Of course, this is a lot easier if you were disabled when you were a kid, because a lot of the skills that I have now in the workforce were developed when I was young, like less than 8 years old, I would say. So, like, because I have those fundamentals, I apply them even in my adulthood. So all I'm saying is that the medical community can help us participate in the workforce, and they can also pay us appropriately for patient modeling and speaking engagements. That's very important.
Yeah. Appropriate pay for people with disabilities, and it's sad that we even have to say that. People think that since the ADA has been passed in 1990, that all things are all things are good. And it's not. We still have a long way to go.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, well, Phil, I want to thank you for coming on Nick Speaks, and we're going to have all of Phil's information where you can find him, his YouTube channel, any other things that he will send us will be in the show notes, and please go check him out because he really is hilarious. And if you're in the Tempe, Arizona area, make sure you go check him out, or any surrounding areas. Make sure you see him booking for speaking engagements, and please pay him well because he deserves it. So, Phil, thank you so much for coming on Nick Speaks. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick, for having me, and thanks for the work that you're doing, trying to raise awareness to these various different issues that we face.
Absolutely. This is the Nick Speaks podcast. I am your host, Nicholas Comstock. This is the podcast dedicated to the disabled community where we speak up, speak out, and speak loud about the issues that matter to the disabled the most. We will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.